Hi you guys! So I've had some requests to do watercolors in my Bible, and I know that that can be a little bit scary and a little bit intimidating, but it's actually super duper fun. We're gonna work on Psalm 138, and one thing I've noticed, I just been turning to different Psalms and all of them are saying his love endures forever. I think that's a message God's trying to get across to me. And Psalm 138 surprised me. At the very end, it talks about your love, O Lord, endures forever. It's snuck in there too. It's over here. It's everywhere. Well, this Psalm 136 is the one where it's like every stanza. So, well, let's first talk about paints. Watercolor paints can really make the difference between a good experience and a bad experience with watercolors. You can start with really inexpensive watercolor paints. That's totally fine, and that's probably a smart move if you're not sure you're gonna like them. But the problem is they don't move well. They are kind of chalky. They resist the blending that's so beautiful that comes from watercolors that can blend together. They just kind of sit on the page and don't really do much, and when you try to push them around, they just kind of get shoved, and they just don't do the beautiful blending that watercolor paints do. You can get these on Amazon. I will have them linked down below. These Prima Paints were the first sets I got. They've got a number of them. I love how tiny they are, so you can take them on the go, and they come with what is it, 12 colors, so it's really sweet. There's a classics set that kind of gives you your regular standard rainbow colors with a black and a couple of browns. I think you also get a white in that one. This one's the tropicals. I love bright colors, so this one's kind of a clear favorite. So I am going to do a wet on wet technique, and both of these are water brushes. They're just different size tips. This one happens to be loaded with more water. That's the only reason I'm doing this. And so I'm just going to drop some water on my page and move it into the shape of a heart. So I'm just drawing with water. Now the beauty of watercolors is that it will almost stay within the boundaries. On watercolor paper, it will. On Bible paper, it's not going to stay quite as well, but it's going to be really pretty. So what I do is I take my brush with the pigment on it, with the paint on it, and I'm going to squeeze this water brush so that look at that, little drops of paint come off around my heart here. And it's going to go into the wrinkles because Bible pages wrinkle. But I just use that advantage. I use that to my advantage too, as a part of just the look of the whole thing. Now this might look a little wet, so you can take a paper towel if you want and soak up some of the ink. Why did I call it ink? You can soak up some of the paint if you want. And you don't have to prep your Bible pages, which seems kind of miraculous and wild if you think about it. But I have unloaded this whole pen worth of water on my Bible page before, and it survives. And even the backside comes out just fine. It doesn't bleed through. So I'll show you. And I like doing a technique where I drop in color like this and then I dry it and I try adding a little bit more. But I'm going to show you how to blend colors really quickly here. So let's add a purple to this. And since I'm not, since I'm blending colors on here, I didn't mind blending them on there. Water paints can get kind of messy. It's okay if you want to really clean them and make them pristine. Just run some water over them. You'll lose a little bit of your paint, but it's a way to clean them. Okay, so I'm dropping paint and water in here at the same time, and it makes this really cool effect. I always keep some watercolor paper to my side, and instead of washing it off, especially with the paintbrush, the water brush here, I swatch it out on a piece of paper. And then, especially for like Bible journaling and stuff, where we use tabs a lot and we like to tab our pages, or you can make tip-ins, things like that. You could turn this into a backdrop for a really pretty card for someone, and you can just blend it out, and then you have this beautiful ombre paint effect, and that's just your leftovers. So you've got really pretty leftovers to punch tabs out of or do whatever you want. So that's kind of fun. Now you can let the watercolor dry naturally. I'm just kind of naturally impatient, so I use my heat tool a lot. But you got to be careful because the heat tool, you can use a hair dryer, but the heat tool has a lot more air coming out all at once, and it comes out hotter. So you can actually burn your paper. You can start to scorch the color of the paint, and you can move the paint to places you didn't want it because it'll blow it. I'm gonna keep my heat tool up pretty high up over here. So at this point, we've got a couple of puddles over here, and I want to get some more of this magenta back in here. Okay, so this is kind of what it looks like. This background might be easier to see. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so I'm just going to drop some more magenta in here. Now this is called wet on dry because I'm going back and putting more paint on top of dry paint. So now I'm going to go over here and clean my brush again. And I'm actually, when I want to get more water and I want just a tiny bit, I put it over here on my scratch paper like this and use it almost like a palette. You could also put it on here, which I do too, but over here then it'll dry and it'll be something really pretty later. So I'm gonna go in and I just want this paint to look a little bit more watercolory than it is. So I'm just dropping some water in on here so it kind of spreads and does the watercolor magic that watercolors do. This looks too harsh of a line for the look I want. So there we go. Now I like these petals. You got to remember my YouTube name here, the Modern Mess Princess. Some people find this messy and weird and they don't like it, and it's just all a matter of personal preference and taste. You can control watercolors, even not on watercolor paper. You can see this stayed inside the lines of the heart pretty darn well for not being watercolor paper. But that's just one technique. So you can do wet on wet, and to keep kind of watercolor in the lines, you can drop more water in it. With watercolors, they will reactivate. So if you see here, if I ruin this page, it's okay. We're doing this for the sake of experimentation. See, I don't know if you can see, but some of the purple is lifting up here and it's getting kind of diluted. So if you want that look, that's great. But if you're gonna go in and expect your paint to not start mixing again if you add water to it, so let's say you wanted more pink in some places and you wanted more purple in some places, well, pretty soon if you just keep adding water and you keep going at it, here we go. We're gonna have it all one color because the watercolor paint always reactivates with water, okay? So whether you leave, like I could reactivate that. In fact, let's do that. Let's turn this flower into, or maybe this heart, I mean, into like a little flower. So let's reactivate this green paint that's been sitting here forever. It's just a teeny little bit, but we can make like a cute little stem out of it or something. So now our heart looks like a little flower. Using negative space here, so keeping a little white space in the middle of the leaf like that also kind of helps make things look a little bit more realistic because it looks like light is coming down and shining in that area. So you can use white space or negative space to your advantage. Then see, I didn't like the way the stem ended. So here, here's how I'm gonna fix it. We're just gonna put more and have it kind of trail off the page. We're gonna pretend that was my artistic vision. It needs a bigger leaf is what it needs. Let's trying to figure out what shape I want. Well, now I need more paint, folks. So let's grab some more paint. It was this color. Let's get a bigger leaf going in here. Now see, on watercolor paper, this wouldn't pool quite like this. It would be really, it'd be a lot prettier, to be honest. But in your Bible, you know, this is pretty fun. And it doesn't have to be scary to put water on your page. Let's add some brighter green highlight down there. Pull some of this water down into here. Add some of the brighter green, pull it over here. That's what I like about watercolors is they don't have to look perfect, and you can use the fact that they're uncontrollable to your benefit. And you kind of have to do that because if you really try to control watercolors, see how I'm trying to I'm trying to get this leaf exactly the way I want it. You can fuss with it a little bit, but if you fuss with it too much, it kind of loses its watercolor beauty, to be honest. It just doesn't want to be fussed with. It wants a light hand, light pressure, couple of swipes, and you're good to go. Unless you want to put some layers in like that. Okay, so those are a couple of different techniques. I can show you more. I'd be glad to. I'm a total watercolor beginner, but I've learned a few things through experimenting that I'm really enjoying about watercolors and using them in my Bible. And so I'd be glad to share those tips with you and how to not waste paint. Because look at, isn't that gorgeous? So let's pretend I had green left over. I think I just want to play with paint now. But you can see how you can use these swatches, and this is real watercolor paper. This is really nice watercolor paper, and see how it dries and it pools differently. See how that's pooling differently? Can you, oh, that's off camera, sorry. See how that's pooling a little bit differently than it is on here? This kind of gets into those cracks and crevices where the paper gets warped, whereas on here, it just kind of sits on top of the paper, which is really, it makes it really nice for moving color around easily. So if you want to paint with watercolors, get watercolor paper, and know in your Bible, if you've painted with watercolors, they're going to be different. They're going to behave differently than they do on watercolor paper. But again, you can use that to your advantage and make these cracks and crevices just part of the unique look that watercolors will give you. Okay, one last tip. I'm going to take a little bit of this. This is really thinned out now. I'm going to add a lot of water. Another thing I like to do is just kind of add a wash of really light color. Or even sometimes, I've been using gray a lot. There just isn't gray in this palette right now. To add kind of a soft background to things, and I really like that. I like adding kind of this soft background. You just don't want to touch, because if we touch the heart, it's gonna bleed. And if that's an effect you want, then that's great. See, I'll show you, because you know I like making a mess, and I'll make the mistakes for you guys so you don't have to make them. But if you go clear up against the edge of the heart, you see how it's bleeding out. Okay, now I like that look, but if you don't, see, I hit a little pool there. One of the gutters. I guess we should call them like a little gutter. They look like a rain gutter. Okay, now this is where I get excited, because this is gonna dry really funky and weird. And this is where I kind of get all symbolic and ask God, you know, just pray, okay, this picture, I kind of don't think things are painted by mistake. Or if you do art journaling, I do art journaling, I kind of think your mistakes aren't really mistakes, and that you can learn something from them. You can learn the metaphor from them. And so it's like, I don't know, is this a bleeding heart to you? Or is this you sharing your heart or pouring your heart out? Now I'm going into my art journaling realm, which I'd be glad to teach too if you guys want some art journaling here. So just let me know. So I hope you've learned a little bit about watercolors, and let me finish drying this up, and then I'll show you what the backside looks like, and I can show you some more techniques in another video. So look at that. There's your backside of your page. No paint came through. I did not prep the page with gesso or anything. We just put watercolor and quite a bit of water, and it did great. When you do use a heat tool, your page will wrinkle more than if you let it dry naturally. But back to me, I'm messy. I don't mind the wrinkle. I feel like it gives it character. I love kind of this sound, but I love paper and that crinkly noise. I like that. But it also does flatten out after you've had your Bible closed for a number of days, and just the weight of the Bible will help kind of press that paper out. If you want to practice before you put it in your Bible, you might want to try practicing on as thin of paper you can find that is not watercolor paper, because if you practice on watercolor paper, you can see how it behaves so differently. You're not going to get this look on Bible paper. If you want this look, create a tip-in. Paint something on some watercolor paper and put it as a tip-in in your margin, and then you can have a beautiful watercolor painting without having to deal with Bible paper. Okay? All right, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you again soon.